Loading hot takes in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back into TwinTakes Fantasy Football, and wow, what a way to start off the 2022 fantasy season. That was an incredible week one and had everything from amazing performances to mind-boggling coaching decisions and even a game that ended in a tie. So we're here to recap everything that went down in week one, grade some guys' performance, talk some major headlines coming off of our first weekend, and then get you prepped for that oh-so-crucial week one waiver wire. So without further ado, let's get into our first headline, and this is something that we're going to really be preaching for the first couple weeks here at TwinTakes, and echoing the sentiment from our week one preview, be patient. It's only week one. There's no need to overreact, especially when it comes to rookies. Now, rookies are crucial for any fantasy championship run. We saw last year how involved Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, and Elijah Mitchell were in getting people championships, and even the year before that, talking about James Robinson, Antonio Gibson, and Justin Jefferson. However, the common thread throughout all these rookies is it takes time for them to mature. Rookies are an investment. They don't just go out in the field and immediately produce. So take everything you saw from the rookies with a grain of salt, and I will be transparent. This segment was inspired by a tweet I saw this morning that said RIP to Dameon Pierce's fantasy hype season, preseason 2022 to preseason 2022. And yeah, haha, we all got a little giggle out of that, but despite his poor performance, he's a guy that he's a rookie, a day 3 rookie coming out of a Florida Gators team that didn't really utilize him nearly as much as an NFL team utilizes theirs back. So it's going to be a learning curve to adjust to the NFL workload, and I expect him to hit his stride here in a few weeks. So I know it was a 4.4 points immediately, but again, patience. Another rookie, some people might have been a little disappointed in Drake London's performance, only throwing up 9.9 points in half PPR, but I was really, really impressed by what I saw. His ability to win downfield, consistently being targeted, consistently making catches, 5 for 74 yards. If he manages to pull down a touchdown in the end zone, this is one of the best fantasy weeks for a wide receiver, and everyone's calling him a wide receiver too. So again, this is only week one against a pretty decent Saints defense, as much as I disparaged them in my week one preview. So I liked everything I saw out of him. A lot of the stuff we talked about with the Atlanta Falcons offense being a little bit better than people predicted. Marcus Mariota came out there, looked really good, and looked like he was pretty like old Marcus Mariota with the Titans, spry, could run, could throw on the move. And I think this offense, after they kind of go through those growing pains, it's a new quarterback, it's a new offensive system, there's tons of new offensive pieces coming in here. It's going to take a little bit while, but I think we're going to see, a little bit more from the Falcons than we anticipated coming into the season. Breece Hall, people I'm sure were disappointed that Michael Carter was still the bell cow of that backfield. But listen, the reason Michael Carter is still going to be on the field is because he's a much better pass blocker and run blocker. So when you're putting in those situations where it's not a designed run play, Michael Carter will obviously be the clear choice because it's going to hold up the pocket a little bit more for Joe Flacco or Zach Wilson. But we should pay attention to the fact that Breece Hall still got 10 targets. 10 targets as a running back is insane. This is why he was the 101 pick in Dynasty, because of his pass catching ability, not because of his pure running ability. So 10 targets is absolutely incredible, and I'm very excited for what he's going to develop down the line. Shows me that the Jets are very committed to his utilization in this offense. Burks, he got 5 targets, 3 catches, was utilized and targeted much more than Robert Woods, who was brought in to be the number 1 here. So again, even though it's only a rookie, he only put up 7 points, but I think he's going to actually be better than people were thinking in the preseason. Although a lot of people were kind of upset or nervous about his utilization after some offseason concerns with his health, but everything I've seen in week one shows me that Burks can be a legit NFL wide receiver. Dotson, he was actually the one guy that was really great. He had 3 catches for 2 touchdowns on 5 targets, putting up 16.5 fantasy points. I know a lot of people are, chiding themselves for leaving him on a bench, but, that's not really sustainable production. I don't think 3 targets is going to turn into 2 touchdowns every single week, but again, stuff that I like to see, his ability to win down the field and absolutely be a viable asset in that offense, especially when we saw targets coming away from Terry McLaurin, which I know T-Mac owners will be a little bit nervous about. Finally, Olave. Michael Thomas returned to form. We saw Jarvis Landry be heavily involved in that offense. So those are, Olave's currently slotted in as a wide receiver 3, but I don't know if Olave will have too much of an impact down the stretch, or at least from a consistency wise. But as a dynasty asset, Olave is great, and Michael Thomas is back to full health apparently, which is good to see for him. So next headline I want to talk about is split backfields, especially when it comes to AJ Dillon and Aaron Jones. And a lot of fantasy analysts like myself are predicting a massive season for Aaron Jones and his pass catching ability in the Green Bay Packers offense. To be fair, the Green Bay Packers looked absolutely abysmal. So the fact that AJ Dillon outscored Aaron Jones from that standpoint should be expected. But what we learned from this game is that as being two of the more veteran, and that's weird to say with AJ Dillon only being in his third year, but as AJ Dillon and Aaron Jones being more the two veteran presences on that offensive line, the Green Bay offense is going to run through the run game in those two guys. They will be the heartbeat of this Green Bay offense. So at this point, I don't think it's an either or. It's you start both of these guys, and they're both going to be heavily utilized and heavily involved in this offense from a pass catching ability and Aaron Jones. And even at this point, I know I'm overreacting to a week one, but I think the fact that AJ Dillon got more of the goal line splits is going to make him a huge candidate for a touchdown opportunity. And he might be the one when 2022 wraps up for the running back in the Green Bay offense. Third headline that's kind of crucial. Again, want to wrap up a headline from last week was the impact of new wide receivers. And I think what this past week kind of came in and confirmed to us is that, listen, the wide receivers, they're talented. They're a crucial part of NFL offenses, but they are not the end-all, be-all. Kind of the way that I've kind of ragged on PFF because they say, a top-tier wide receiver will completely elevate an offense. I don't particularly think that's the case. I think the particular wide receiver in question, their talent sets their floor, and then that's either amplified or mitigated by the situation that they are put in. And that was kind of confirmed to me over this past weekend. Adams obviously is the second best wide receiver in my opinion in the league. He came in and had the second best wide receiver grade and points on the week. Obviously, we look at the situation in Green Bay and situation in Las Vegas being fairly similar. Decent quarterback, throws in the pocket, has a good connection with them, tons of offensive weapons, and he was able to produce because he's just that talented. Tyreek, he did play well. He was able to haul in a few catches, but I think he was hampered by Tua and his offense. No one's going to argue, except for maybe Tyreek, that Patrick Mahomes is head and shoulders above Tua when it comes to being an NFL quarterback. And I don't think the touchdown upside that we've come to expect with Tyreek is going to be there now that Tua is his quarterback. So Tyreek's still a very talented player. We're just going to see a lot more stat lines like we saw this past weekend with, 80 to 90 yards, but no touchdowns on a few catches. Amari Cooper, definitely expected him coming to this new offense and was not an upgrade at all. He's not as talented as the two guys I just talked about, but coming to a situation where the quarterback is probably a bottom 5 quarterback in the league in Jacoby Brissett, and it's a heavy run-first offense. The fact that Cooper got, I think, 1.3 fantasy points was not surprising, and definitely would be a guy that I'd be avoiding going forward. Really, any receiver in that Browns offense based on this past week. AJ Brown, again, when we talk about still a talented guy, came over to, when we talked about it last week, is more of a one-to-one, I said, from coming from the Titans to the Eagles, and that's what we saw. We saw him win down the field. We saw him put up a ton of numbers. We saw him have great after-the-catch ability and just be a great target for quarterbacks who aren't as accurate as we might like. And he put up quite a good stat line, 20.5 points without even a touchdown. So if he gets a touchdown, it skyrockets him into that Devontae Adams, Cooper Kupp stratosphere. So again, same production we can anticipate from him coming from Titans, maybe even a little bit higher just because of how the Eagles offense rolls. And finally, Hollywood Brown is the one guy that kind of bucked the trend of what I was saying with, again, talented wide receivers produce, but they don't rectify a situation. They're at the mercy of their situation. Hollywood Brown, I thought was going to have a good game against a weakened Chiefs secondary, but again, in hindsight, is 2020. He missed a ton of the preseason. So did Kyler. That rapport isn't there yet. There's still a lot of growing pains. There's a lot of players out on the Cardinals offense. So again, he was saved by a touchdown in garbage time, but most people who were sitting with him at 4.5 points for most of the game were really frustrated. I think that's going to get a little bit better down the line. So again, just be patient with that. So that's what I think of the impact of new wide receivers, and kind of, reaffirms my analysis of when we look at wide receivers, we grade them based on the talent and the situation. They're not exempt from situation. They don't change the situation. Their talent's either mitigated or amplified based on that situation. So that's kind of a good mental note to keep in mind as we go into free agency and years coming forward. And finally, we got to talk about the Dallas Cowboys. What happened? Obviously, they looked absolutely anemic even before the Dak injury. But now, what do we do with CeeDee Lamb, with Dalton Schultz, with Ezekiel Elliott? Now that Dak's out, and we have to presume that Cooper Rush is going to be the quarterback right now. Everything, I've heard some people say now that Dak is out, the offense is going to run through Zeke. And that was the same argument I heard 2 years ago when Dak had that terrible ankle injury. But if we're being quite honest with how the Cowboys offense functions, without a good quarterback dictating the offense, Zeke is not that powerful of a runner. He's not someone that can completely take over the game. And I think you really have to be wary of all the Cowboy assets you have. Damper your expectations. It's going to be a rough year for any Cowboy assets. We kind of talked about this a little bit when we mentioned that I had major concerns around this Dallas offense with the way the offensive line shaped out, shifting off La'el Collins and Connor Williams to the Bengals and Dolphins respectively. And then also when Tyron Smith got hurt, and we kind of talked through some statistics of how the offensive efficiency was pretty much in line with the offensive grade from PFF. And this only hurts and compounds the situation now that Dak's hands injury. So will be interesting to see how Jerry Jones and Mike McCarthy rectify the situation. Maybe they go out and trade for Jimmy Garoppolo. That would be a smart thing to do. But at this point, I'm approaching all Cowboys assets with great fear, basically. I'm very concerned about playing them, even Zeke as a flex at this point. So those are some headlines that we wrapped up from this past weekend. Let's go in and talk about my guys, holding myself accountable every single week for the 5 guys that I put out for confidence in starting on the Thursday prior to the game. Let's go Kareem Hunt, number 1. This is an A++ grade. Kind of the game played out kind of what I expected it would be. Browns super heavy run-based offense, really split the ball between Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, really gotten him involved in the pass game as well. Took a touchdown through the air and one on the ground. Again, very dynamic player coming out of the backfield with Kareem Hunt. So yeah, 21 fantasy points. You're very happy with that, and he's going to be a bona fide RB2, not even low end, like maybe a middle to high end RB2 going forward, and you're not going to sit him as long as he's not on his bye. So A++ for Kareem. Very happy about that. Drake London, I'm giving him a B-. And you look at it, he was projected for 9.9 points. He got exactly 9.9 points, and that's the definition of a C. Performed as expected. He literally got the points that he was expected to put up. But, just the way he achieved those 9.9 points, it wasn't one big play. It wasn't some lucky fluke. It wasn't garbage time yards. It was meaningful football in which he accumulated those points. And if he pulls down a touchdown, we're talking about an A grade here for Drake London. I expect to see him really maturing and getting more involved in this offense as it goes on. So very happy, and I'll stick with a B- right now for Drake London. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, another A+ grade. And just reaffirming what we've talked about. Vacated targets go to the running back. Everyone say it with me now. Vacated targets go to the running back. He was heavily involved in both the rushing aspect and the passing aspect, kind of putting to bed any sort of rumors that Isaiah Pacheco is going to come in and steal his job, Ronald Jones is going to come and steal his job. No, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is a bona fide number 1 running back on this team, going to be utilized in that such way, and Patrick Mahomes has no qualms about relying on him. Both of his touchdowns came through the air, 20.9 points, absolutely solid RB2, high-end RB2 that will be started in every single game going forward. Allen Lazard, I'm going to go and say not applicable just because he was ruled out for the game. We knew this coming in, that there's a possibility that he would miss the game. So unfortunately cannot grade a player that did not play. So right now I'm just going to say inconclusive or not applicable. But given the way that the Green Bay offense performed, we could probably assume that it would have been a bad play. Hopefully, when Allen Lazard comes back into the offense, they rebound. But, at least the Packers made that decision easy for you if you had Allen Lazard in your bench and you're considering flexing him. Finally, we'll go with Nyheim Hines. I'm going to give him a C+. This game did not play out how I expected it to do, with the Houston Texans getting an absolute pretty significant lead on the Colts, and the Colts having to fight to play catch up. I thought it was going to be very much the other way around, and the starters between Pittman and Taylor are going to be rested most of the second half. But as we saw, Nyheim Hines was still heavily involved. I think it's undisputed now that Hines is the second best pass catcher on this offense. He was able to haul in 6 catches for 50 receiving yards and was utilized a little bit on the ground with additional 4 rushing yards. He outperformed marginally what he expected in 8.4 points, which is not the worst flex in the world. And if it's a PPR league, then he's well into double digits and you're pretty happy with that. So I will give him a C+, and I'm expecting him to be, don't drop him. He'll be valuable later on down the line, and he's performed a lot better than some of the duds that we're going to talk about here later in the show. So those are my grades. Just to recap: A+ for Kareem Hunt, B- for Drake London, A+ for Clyde Edwards-Helaire, not applicable for Lazard, and C+ for Nyheim Hines. Overall, I'll take it. Good week 1. I'm pretty happy about it. All right, let's talk about some studs on the week. Obviously, wide receiver, number 1 overall, the guy that I projected to be the number 1 wide receiver on the year, a guy that's in a class of his own, Justin Jefferson, 9 for 184 and 2 touchdowns. Absolutely unreal from Justin Jefferson. Basically, I was talking to my brother about this in Dynasty, and we're talking like Justin Jefferson's basically an untouchable asset. Like, you couldn't even offer 3 first rounds and 3 second rounds and expect someone to give that up. That's just how valuable and how good Justin Jefferson is, especially in Dynasty. DeAndre Swift, warms my soul that he's up here, had 25 points, 144 yards on the ground, which is absolutely insane against that Philadelphia defense, which in and of itself is no slouch. Was also involved in the pass game. Expect him to get more involved in the pass game with only 3 receptions this time. I expect him to average more about 5 targets per game, and also got a TD rushing. He got a TD through the air as well. So this is a guy that I projected to be a top 3 running back on the year just because of his pass catching ability and how dynamic he is, and really happy to see that it's starting to kind of come through. And I think that people were sleeping on the Lions a little bit. They actually could be a pretty decent offense. So we'll be very much excited to watch what Swift continue to do. Saquon Barkley, boy, is he back. A lot of concerns around the injury, a lot of concerns about the time missed. He fell to the 3rd round. He fell to the 2nd round, maybe even the 3rd round in some drafts, but now he's looking like he should have been a top 5 asset. 30.4 points, absolutely monstrous game, 164 yards on the ground, 1 TD, and 6 catches for 30 yards through the air. This man is the heart and soul of that Giants offense. Daniel Jones relies on him. Brian Daboll relies on him. Also put in that work and go back and watch that 2-point conversion. This dude is a beast. I have no question about his health. He's running and attacking the ground like he has full confidence in his repaired knee and his ankle. Saquon's a beast, dude. I'm sorry for ever doubting him coming into this season, but he's a guy that I think will win people some championships this year. So the only other really fantasy relevant asset on the Giants offense was Sterling Shepard, which I don't anticipate, Sterling to maintain that throughout the season. So the Giants will go as Saquon go, and Saquon will absolutely be the fantasy asset that he was drafted to be the past 2 years and that people got at an absolute steal this year. Number 4, Jonathan Taylor, number 101 overall consensus. Who would have guessed that he'd have a great game against the worst rushing defense in the league? Nothing much to say here. 161 rush yards and TD, and also was involved in the passing game. It's Jonathan Taylor, man. What do you expect? He's going to be absolutely amazing. And finally, we got to throw a quarterback in. Patrick Mahomes absolutely diced up the Arizona Cardinals for an astonishing 34.9 points. 360 yards through the air and 5 TDs is going to be an absolute immaculate game. And Patrick Mahomes reminded everyone that I think, I mean, it's only been 1 week, but I think we can say Patrick Mahomes might have made Tyreek Hill, which I've been saying the entire time. Just look at Tyreek's stats when he's with Smith compared to Mahomes, and that he can still do it without Tyreek there in Kansas City. So Mahomes is the real deal. He can do no wrong, unlike his brother. A few honorable mentions. Josh Allen obviously had an amazing game to start out on Thursday night. Travis Kelce, tight end 1 by far. One of the few tight ends that you should be drafting early, 22.1 points. Jamar Chase was up there as well. Devontae Adams, we'd already talked about, had an amazing game. A.J. Brown, Cooper Kupp, Michael Pittman are all some amazing wide receivers. And on that note, for all those people that draft RB early, maybe you should be changing your tune a little bit. Maybe the hero RB strategy is looking a little bit more appealing after we're seeing a very disproportionate amount of wide receivers taken, becoming studs, and I don't want to say mediocreness, but the averageness of some of these top end running backs. Looking at you, Dalvin Cook. So now let's move on to the depressing part of the show. We're talking about the duds. Cam Akers, holy moly, 0 points, 3 rush attempts. This is incredibly concerning for anyone who's holding on to Cam Akers. I mean, everyone was coming off like so hyped that he got back from the Achilles so quickly, came back last year, was a part of that playoff run for the Rams, but he looked pitiful. I really don't know what. I tried to do some research on Twitter, and see what exactly was the issue, why Sean McVay wouldn't really want to play him, but it just seems like Darrell Henderson might just be the better back at this point, and Cam Akers just never really came back 100% from the Achilles. Second dud here, Kyle Pitts. This is why we don't draft tight ends early. Positional advantage is a myth. There's so much value. We're going to talk about on a waivers wire later that you can find value on the waiver wire for tight end. And Kyle Pitts is taking you away from some of those guys like a Michael Pittman. Just like a Michael Pittman or some of those other guys that are scoring you 20 to 25 points from an actual valuable skill position slot. So I hate to say it, but this is why we choose this route when it comes to tight ends. Mike Williams, that was bizarre. That was really bizarre. I expect him to bounce back next week, absolutely, especially with Keenan Allen's hamstring injury. I don't know what happened with Mike Williams because it seemed like a lot of pieces on the offense were involved. Joshua Palmer was involved. Gerald Everett was involved. Joshua Kelly even got pretty involved in the offense. And Mike Williams, the guy that they just paid a ton of money to, not involved. Listen, don't overreact. Hold your Mike Williams shares. He'll be fine. He'll bounce back, especially if Keenan Allen is actually hurt. He's going to be the clear-cut wide receiver in this one, and we saw Justin Herbert is an absolute beast. I have full confidence in the Chargers offense. They're going to keep rolling. Patience with Mike Williams. David Montgomery is number 4 on this list, a guy that I was pretty worried of coming into the season. Injury concerns, utilization in the preseason, and frankly, just there's a lack of confidence emanating from the head coach and the rest of the coaching staff. The only thing that really concerns me, he got 0 touches in the red zone. 0. All the touches in the red zone went to Khalil Herbert. That is not something you want from your starting running back. I would be benching David Montgomery in favor of a James Robinson, in favor of an A.J. Dillon, in favor of even a Chase Edmonds at this point. There's a lot of guys that I'd be playing over David Montgomery. Like, this is very, very concerning. And lastly, Alvin Kamara, something I kind of hinted at in my wild predictions for every single team. I said even if Alvin Kamara doesn't get suspended, he will be outside the top 12 running backs on this season, just from age, B, utilization, and wear and tear on the tires. We kind of saw that. He got knocked up a little bit, had a rib injury that Dennis Allen was saying he was dealing with. I shouldn't be concerned, but you could tell he was clearly affecting him in his way that he was taking contact. Only 6.1 points is very upsetting for people who were taking Alvin Kamara over at the 1-2 turn. Some other honorable mentions is obviously Zeke, and I have real concerns about him going forward, especially after the Dak injury. Allen Robinson, I guess his last season wasn't an apparition and is actually kind of the way Allen Robinson is. I know there's a ton of hype coming out about him in preseason, but yikes. 2 targets, 1.7 points, really concerning that Tyler Higbee, of all people, got targeted more than him. This should be a prove-it game against the Atlanta Falcons coming up this week, but if Allen Robinson puts up another dud, then I will be extremely concerned. Darnell Mooney had 1.3 points. Listen, I'm not concerned. I explained why I was anticipating Darnell Mooney to have a bad game. Just the Justin Fields connection, the Niners O-line. Also, that field was insane. Go watch the videos of it's basically a slip and slide out there. It's kind of crazy. Darnell Mooney, don't panic. Hold on to him. He'll get better. He'll develop a connection with Justin Fields. Things will get better. We knew he was going to have a bad week 1, and that is okay. Brandon Ayuk, another guy that we knew was going to have a bad week 1 just based on the matchup. We did see that Kyle Shanahan did rely a lot on the run for Trey Lance, especially to keep his quote-unquote rookie quarterback pretty comfortable in the offense. Dak Prescott, obviously a 4.46 points. Pretty abysmal. And then the injury definitely didn't help. So very concerning around Dallas. And I mean, if you're a Dak Prescott owner, you got to be scrambling for a decision at this point. And finally, T. Higgins. Obviously, this is something that I'm not going to take full credit for because the going with the concussion protocol and being absent for the rest of the game certainly hurt his production. But I still was never high on some of these Bengals that I talked about. I thought their ADP was inflated. Joe Burrow came out, did not look like the same Joe Burrow that was slinging the rock down their Super Bowl run last year. Pretty rocky start to the season there. So that's the reason why T. Higgins makes this list. Again, a guy that I wasn't too high on beforehand. And then obviously a lot of these compounding factors ended up having a dud game. So those are our duds. And we talked about guys that, either this is concerning or not concerning for their particular reasons. All right. Last section today, we're going to talk about waiver wire pickups and the guys that I'm angling for because, we have these breakouts in week 1 that'll change the trajectory of your team, and you can pick them up to completely alter the direction of your team. So number 1, the most must add of this weekend is a tight end because we know we find value on the waiver wire in tight ends. We don't draft them. Is Robert Tonyan. So why are we drafting Robert Tonyan? He had 5 targets, the most of any receiver on that Green Bay offense. The only person that out-targeted him was A.J. Dillon, who's a running back. We already talked about his relevance in this offense. He's someone that has a rapport, has the trust of Aaron Rodgers, and someone who I think is going to be heavily utilized once that offense starts clicking. Again, he's here on the waiver wire because of injury concerns, but he looked just fine. Put up a decent enough game to show me that Aaron Rodgers still trusts him, still targets him highly, and will be utilized in this offense once the rust stops setting in, once they shake off the rust and that Green Bay offense starts to pick up a little bit. Number 2, must add wide receiver is Devin Duvernay. He had 4 targets, 4 receptions, most receptions of any wide receiver. Yes, more than Rashad Bateman, and he had the second most targets, just behind Bateman. We all thought Rashad Bateman was going to be the number 1 alpha wide receiver in this offense, and it looks like Devin Duvernay actually could be that guy. Highly targeted, 100% catch rate on all the targets that Lamar threw to him, and just a guy that was overlooked in the pre-draft process. So if this is the guy that comes out of that backfield, maybe we got it wrong. Maybe Devin Duvernay is going to be that alpha wide receiver, and Bateman's just that deep threat, and Duvernay soaks a lot of the underneath targets, soaks up red zone targets, and kind of splits that security blanket duty with Mark Andrews. So Devin Duvernay, if you have spot and you need a wide receiver, he is a must add after week 1. Dontrell Hilliard, he is a guy that's definitely going to be heavily involved in this Titans offense going forward. I think he's a must add for the running back spot, especially if you are a Derrick Henry owner. We saw Derrick Henry not have the best game. He looks a little concerning around, his actual strength in running. He doesn't look as strong as he had in past years, and I think a lot of it has to do with the injury from last year. And I don't know if he fully trusts his legs and his rebuilt foot there. But Dontrell Hilliard is clearly the number 2 back, so you have him as a backup. But even with Derrick Henry in the field, Hilliard was really heavily involved in the red zone, getting 2 red zone targets and pulling in 2 touchdowns, 2 carries, 4 targets, 4 catches, just really involved in the offense. And we saw that Robert Woods, who was brought in to be the wide receiver 1, just never really got that connection built up with Ryan Tannehill. And Tannehill relied on, in the passing game, he really relied on Kyle Phillips, Traylon Burks, and Dontrell Hilliard. So a good flex option going forward and a must add if Derrick Henry ever goes down. So yeah, if you have extra spot, stash Hilliard. Number 4, this is kind of, we're getting to guys that only if you have spots or if it's in a deeper league. Noah Brown, he had an insane target share in the Cowboys offense, and especially after Dak went out and Cooper Rush is the quarterback going forward for the Cowboys. Cooper Rush hyper-targeted Noah Brown. He had 9 targets. 7 of those came with Cooper Rush. Those turned into 5 receptions and had a pretty decent stat line of around 9 points. Again, just get on him early. If Cooper Rush is going to be the guy that carries the Cowboys for the next 8 weeks, expect Noah Brown to be heavily involved, especially while Michael Gallup and Jordan Tolbert are still not involved in the offense. Last wide receiver I want to talk about is Curtis Samuel. Curtis had himself a game, and he's, not like Saquon, but similar to Saquon in the fact that he's just been hampered by injuries the past couple of years. Just hasn't really been on the field, but he did it all over the field. He had 11 targets, the most of anyone in that Commanders backfield, more than Terry McLaurin, more than Dotson, more than Antonio Gibson or any other target. I'm calling Curtis Samuel right now the poor man's Deebo Samuel, just because, again, 4 rushes for 17 yards, 8 receptions, throwing a touchdown there to boot. And again, this is not something that, we haven't seen before. He was used in this poor man's Deebo Samuel role and poor man's Cordero Patterson role in Carolina. And who was the coach there? Oh yeah, his same coach here in DC, Ron Rivera. So we know Ron loves Curtis. He seems to have a great connection established with Carson Wentz already. He does it with both his legs and through the air. He's going to be a guy that's going to be a weekly flex spot for someone who's lucky enough to pick him up. Honorable mention has to be Julio Jones. If your league is smart, he won't be on the waiver wire, but I have to throw this out there. With Godwin's injury, Julio Jones looked really good in the Tampa Bay offense. Pick him up if he, for some reason, is left in your waiver wire, but I'm anticipating that he probably won't be. Last note here, tight ends. This is why we don't draft them too early. There's so much value to grab at tight ends. Taysom Hill, number 1, again, is just a cheat code at tight end. He had, 88 rushing yards and then 2 targets through the air. One of them turned into a pass, and then he ran for another touchdown. So, if you're getting a tight end that's rushing for 88 yards and a touchdown, that's pretty much a cheat code. It's not exactly a tight end, but no one knows how to label Taysom Hill in today's day and age. Gerald Everett, especially if Keenan Allen is injured, we saw him really get utilized in this Chargers offense. Again, Justin Herbert is one of the best quarterbacks in the league, was utilized down the field, an end zone target. Think he'll have a real bounce back year, and just people are down on him because he was stuck up in Seattle with Russ, who doesn't target tight ends. Logan Thomas, if you're in a deeper league and need a stretch for tight end, he's a great option. We saw heavy utilization in that Commanders offense, and Carson Wentz has sustained tight end ones in the past with Zach Ertz. Tyler Conklin had 9 targets in the Jets offense, especially against a stout Ravens defense. I'm pretty happy with what he was able to cook up in that Ravens defense. And if he's going to be hyper targeted by Joe Flacco and Zach Ertz, Conklin should be a pretty substantial tight end asset. And finally, Tyler Higbee is going to be the last tight end. I'll say if he's staying on your waiver wire and you need a backup tight end, go grab him. He was the second most targeted guy behind Cooper Kupp, because no one will ever out-target Cooper Kupp when Matthew Stafford just force feeds him. But if Allen Robinson continues on this path and doesn't have this expected resurgence as people were kind of alluding to in the preseason, Tyler Higbee, especially with Van Jefferson out, will be the second favorite target of Matthew Stafford in this offense and should be a pretty good week-to-week start at tight end. Guys that you should not waste your waiver wire pickups on. Avoid these guys. Isaiah Pacheco, he looks great. He got a lot of fantasy points. It was all in garbage time. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is still the number 1 there. If it's a closer game, he doesn't get on the field. He doesn't get that touchdown. Robbie Anderson, most of his points came on a 75-yard from Baker. It was not a play that I see that being sustainable. Sterling Shepard, a lot of points, had a touchdown, not sustainable due to old age. Looks horrible on the field, not explosive. And I think they're going to eventually, once Kadarius Toney figures out his involvement and once Kenny Galladay gets more involved, Sterling Shepard is just going to waste the roster spot. And finally, if we're going to bring this full circle back to the top, we talked about why Dameon Pierce was such a letdown. Well, that's because Rex Burkhead got a ton of the targets and carries in this Texans backfield. Lovie Smith seems to favor him, but I promise you, if you pick up Rex Burkhead, under no circumstance are you going to say, yeah, let me start Rex Burkhead over any of the other options on my roster. All he's going to do is clog a bench spot for someone that could be more valuable, like a tight end that we just talked about that could you could be holding for whenever your main tight end has a bye week. So don't pick up Isaiah Pacheco. Don't waste fab on Robbie Anderson or Rex Burkhead, and definitely steer clear of wasting a roster spot just having Sterling Shepard on your bench for a few weeks before you inevitably drop him again. So that is the recap of week 1. Wow, that was a ton of information to go over. I hope that kind of gave you some clarity around how we're looking at the weeks and how we're anticipating or how we're analyzing these results from week 1, what we're expecting going forward. Obviously, there's a long season to play out again, so patience. We'll get through this together. We'll be here every week talking about these breakdowns, and we'll be here every Thursday going over the week 1 preview to get you ready. All right, take care, guys. See you in a few days.